Good morning. I think we'd like to get started. Good morning to everyone. My name is Karen Haas, and I'm the Clerk of the House of Representatives. Welcome to the United States Capitol and to the International Meeting on Achieving Greater Transparency in Legislatures through the Use of Open Document Standards. I'd like to thank our House leadership, the United Nations, the Interparliamentary Union, the Global Center for ICT in Parliaments, and all of the participants for taking time out of your busy schedules to come today. I would also like to thank our internal House support groups for all of their assistance in making this meeting possible. At the start of the 112th Congress, the House adopted a rules package that identified electronic documents as a priority for the institution. House Speaker John Boehner and Majority Leader Eric Cantor directed the House to establish and maintain electronic data standards for the House and its committees for the purpose of transitioning the House to more open data formats such as XML. This legislative data is the property of the American public and therefore should be publicly available in machine-readable formats on House websites. As you may be aware, we currently webcast House proceedings in real time on houselive.gov. During 2011, we improved that distribution to include mobile devices such as tablets and smartphones. Additionally, we updated House Floor Activities website for ease of use and made proceedings downloadable in XML. The new site, recently we created the docs.house.gov website. This new website allows the public access to download House bills, amendments, and resolutions that we will be considering on the House floor. We continue to look for further ways to improve each of these areas, as well as the best way to use social media. Some of the solutions we are exploring may require a change to our current processes and standardization of other processes. Additionally, hardware and software upgrades will be needed to change the way data is produced and displayed. As you know, these are some of the challenges that all parliaments are facing as we move toward achieving greater transparency. We hope that this meeting will provide a forum to discuss the challenges that we have, and we look to share with one another and the possibility to identify areas where we can agree to discuss common standards. Again, let me thank each of you for coming here today, and I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce our next speaker, Mr. John Mary Calzuya, Chief of Public Administration and Capacity Branch of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Honorable Clerk of the U.S. House of Representatives, Honorable President of the Association of the Secretaries General of Parliaments, Honorable Secretary Generals, distinguished participants, I'm happy to be here with you at this important event. And it is also my pleasure to deliver to you a message on behalf of Ms. Hyan Chan, the Director of the Division for Public Administration and Development Management, who could not be here with us. It is an honor to welcome you at this international meeting on behalf of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, and to address you on a topic that is clearly emerging as essential for enhancing transparency of legislative bodies, improving public access and availability to legislative documents, and an informed, empowered, and politically active civil society. The Global Center for IC in Parliament is one of the initiatives that is emphasizing an important point in development, which is actually the point of partnership. You probably know that it is a child of the United Nations Department of Economic Affairs, the IPU, a number of parliaments, many of them represented here. And so we are glad to be hosted by you, Honorable Clerk of House of Representatives. While we celebrate and recognize the importance of the use of ICT in many development endeavors, we know that without partnerships, even the development of ICT itself is in jeopardy, and this emphasizes the importance of the growth and development of the Global Center for ICT in Parliament. The current meeting is a good example of the progress achieved by the Global Center since its launch in 2006. Having attracted wide recognition and extensive network of partners, the Center has convened this meeting on an expert matter vitally important to the further enhancement of transparency in the work of legislatures, and that is how to reap the benefits of information made available in reusable and machine-readable formats. Access to public documents and records has been debated many times in international fora and meetings by different stakeholders, governments, parliaments, civil society organizations, and academia. And these gatherings have helped to make substantial progress at the national and international levels by bringing citizens closer to public information. In recent years, we have witnessed an increasing number of countries that have implemented the specific legislation on the right for access to information or specific programs aiming at opening data held by government bodies, fostering a culture of transparency and accountability in public institutions. Notwithstanding these efforts, much still needs to be done to extend these rights to a larger segment of the world's population. In the last decade, the rapid progress of the information society and the continuous evolution of modern technologies have offered public institutions new opportunities to foster democratic values of openness and accountability, and provided society with powerful instruments to proactively monitor and even assess the performance of public bodies and elected officials. The notion of transparency, as defined in the past, is slowly adopting to reflect the novelty brought by the information revolution. As outlined in the World e-Parliament report of 2008 and reiterated in 2010 edition, in addition to greater transparency, there are a number of complementary advantages on the use of open documents standards that can bring efficiency and effectiveness to the business of parliaments. Open standards make it easier to exchange documents between individuals, offices, and organizations. Search engines can provide more accurate results, and users can formulate more precise queries if data is tagged for its specific content. Links among documents can be created automatically and even be established between elements within documents. Also, long-term preservation of documents can be ensured. Despite these advantages, however, only a limited number of parliaments have implemented or planned for the use of open standards in parliamentary records, hence making this topic an emerging priority for parliaments, and facilitating experience sharing at the international level has become increasingly important. We therefore see this meeting as an excellent opportunity to advance policy, dialogue, and technical exchanges among parliaments that are currently using these types of technologies in order to expand cooperation and in the longer term assist other legislatures in taking advantage of available knowledge, tools, and best practices. At the same time, we expect that this meeting will be also instrumental in identifying new venues for potential collaboration and synergies among parliaments, universities, the private sector, and international organizations to ensure deep-rooted democracy, transparency, accountability, and enhanced engagement of citizens in the debates for effective governance. For this, I would like to reaffirm that the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, through its Division for Public Administration and Development Management, is committed to continue supporting the work of the Global Center for ICT in Parliament on these matters, and to continue its important partnerships with the Interparliamentary Union, among others, which allowed in the past 5 years to successfully establish a parliamentary community around ICT issues. Honorable Clerk, I would like to conclude by thanking you, the United States House of Representatives, for hosting this important event and for extending to us your warm welcome. I would also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the efforts of all participants who will provide their contributions through this meeting, and I wish you fruitful deliberations on behalf of UNDESA. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mr. Marc Bosc, Deputy Clerk of the House of Commons of Canada. Mr. Bosc serves as the President of the Association of Secretaries General of Parliament. He speaks here today on behalf of the Interparliamentary Union. Mr. Bosc?
Thank you. Distinguished delegates, the Secretary General of the Interparliamentary Union, Anders Johnson, has asked me to deliver these opening remarks on his behalf as he's unable to be here today. I'm pleased to do so in my capacity as the President of the ASGP. The ASGP's members are the people responsible for national parliamentary services around the world. The people within parliaments who develop ICT and public information strategies are usually responsible to us, those of us who manage parliaments. We are very often the channel between them and the parliamentarians, as well as between them and the resources they need to do their jobs. As many of you know, the ASGP's mission is in part to study the law, procedure, practice, and working methods of different parliaments, and to foster cooperation between the services of different parliaments. Today's meeting fits perfectly with those aims, and I will report its conclusions back to the next meeting of the ASGP in Uganda in April this year. So please allow me to deliver the following remarks on behalf of Mr. Johnson. I would like to extend warm greetings to you all and express sincere thanks to the U.S. House of Representatives for hosting this meeting. In doing so, the House of Representatives is demonstrating its commitment to being a leader in using ICT to open up Parliament. It is also helping to further interparliamentary cooperation and building on the outcome of the 2009 World e-Parliament Conference that took place in this very building. I also recognize the United Nations, which since 2005 has been a partner with the IPU in a very successful initiative, the Global Center for ICT in Parliament. The Global Center does a great job of tracking the use of ICT in the World e-Parliament report and facilitating knowledge sharing among parliamentary ICT experts at conferences such as this and other global or regional events. I sincerely hope that this initiative will continue to grow and provide useful services to parliaments. Our subject this week is greater transparency in Parliament, and in particular, one of the most recent evolutions in parliamentary practice, the use of open document standards. The IPU identifies transparency as one of the 5 core objectives of a democratic parliament. In my opening remarks, I would like to share with you 3 reasons why I think transparency is important and some considerations for parliaments as they use ICT to work towards this objective. The first reason is that people expect transparency from parliaments and other public institutions. The Internet has created an expectation that everything will be out there, publicly accessible and free of charge. Many people don't understand why they should have to struggle to get data about what happens in Parliament in formats that are easy to work with. The risk is that if the expectation is not met, the perception of Parliament as a closed institution may increase. Secondly, transparency encourages innovation. Some of the most innovative uses of parliamentary data do not come from within parliaments, but from individuals or small organizations that take an interest in political life. They gather parliamentary data, such as voting records, speeches, committee work, and mash it up so that the end product is something new or packaged in a way that is easy for people to understand. This is not to say that everything these people do with parliamentary data is necessarily good or something that we would want to be doing ourselves, but there is inherent virtue in making parliamentary data available so that young people can use their creativity and energy in ways that we had not thought of or cannot do because of institutional constraints. Third, transparency reinforces the legitimacy of Parliament. Parliaments need popular support to be able to function as the link between citizens and government. With the flourishing of civil society and new forms of participatory democracy, citizens have many routes to representation and redress. Where parliaments were once the single most important way to articulate public concern, now they are competing with a variety of alternatives. Yet parliaments have never been more vital. The challenge facing parliaments in all parts of the world is one of continual evolution, ensuring that they respond strategically and effectively to changing public demands for representation. For these reasons and more, it is important for parliaments to express their commitment to greater transparency. Your presence here today suggests that you share this conviction. Please allow me to put forward a few ideas for your consideration. They are drawn from the first Global Parliamentary Report, which the IPU will publish in April this year with the United Nations Development Programme, and which analyzes the changing nature of parliamentary representation. Research for the Global Parliamentary Report shows that parliaments in every part of the world are taking a wide range of initiatives to improve information, understanding, and engagement with the public. In response to the IPU survey for the report, almost all parliaments highlighted the fact that their web presence had been or was in the process of being revamped to make material more accessible to voters in recent years. What does the analysis tell us? First, the use of technology is likely to be most successful when it forms part of a much wider commitment from Parliament to involve the public in the policy-making process. New communication technologies offer the potential to develop a genuine and continuing dialogue between Parliament and citizens. But there needs to be the political will to make this happen. In other words, these mechanisms are not an alternative to other forms of consultation, but need to be integrated into a wider engagement strategy. Secondly, many parliaments do not have a strategic analysis of what constitutes success. The assumption appears to be that more public involvement is a good thing in and of itself, which it may be. Yet there is, to date, little sense of to what extent engagement strategies have improved the public perception of Parliament, enhanced understanding, or improved legislative outcomes. The problems that these strategies are trying to address, public understanding, trust, and perceptions of Parliament, have multiple causes. A parliamentary strategy is likely to have only a partial effect, and separating the impact of a successful outreach strategy from all other possible causes is difficult. Nevertheless, the absence of clear, identifiable objectives against which to judge such programs remains a continuing problem. Lastly, the promise of greater consultation needs to be backed up by a sense of tangible impact in Parliament. Efforts to build a closer relationship between parliaments and citizens must be accompanied by a commitment to ensure that greater transparency and consultation with the public lead to visible outcomes. The implications of greater consultation are overtly political. Although parliaments are arguably more responsive than ever before, they face continuing challenges in implementing their development strategies, identifying what success looks like and managing the tension between the institutional promise of greater influence offered by more consultation and the political implications of giving citizens more control. As we tackle these challenges, I encourage all parliaments to continue to share methods and lessons learned with their peers. This meeting offers an opportunity to take another step forward, and I hope that your discussions will be stimulating and productive. Thank you.
Let me again thank everyone for your participation here today. We're now ready to move into the first panel.
Good morning. My name is Gerardo Cassini. I think probably the majority of you knows me. I'm the head of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs office in Rome, but I'm also behind the scenes the director or executive coordinator of the Global Center for ICT in Parliament, ad interim for the the last 5 years. I'm very pleased to be here at this meeting and to moderate this panel. I have two very well-known person in the ASGP, the Association of Secretary General of Parliament. As you heard already, Marc Bosc is the president of the association, and we have the general director of the Chamber of Deputies of Brazil with me. Now, this panel is going to address a very, I think, interesting topic, which is the evolution of the notion of the concept of transparency in legislatures due to the progress in the information society or the technologies that have so much changed our life in the last 10, 15, maybe 20 years. So, and we hope that after the two presentations, which will probably and most likely touch on the different experiences of the House of Commons of Canada and the Chamber of Deputies of Brazil, to open up a lively debate on this topic. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Marc Bosc for his presentation. Thank you.
This is a bit more comfortable. I hope to leave plenty of time for that debate that Gerardo spoke about. Happy to be here today and to share with you a little bit of what has been happening in Canada and our perspective on this really very timely discussion. I'm going to focus a bit of my opening remarks on the aspect of evolution. And there are limited numbers of copies of the whole paper over on the table to my right. Obviously, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but suffice it to say that all parliaments have had some sort of evolution, and that most recent changes in technology are really part of an ongoing continuum. Certainly the case in Canada, where if you look at history as in terms of decades and centuries, it's not that long ago that elected officials were individuals who traveled to a distant capital, conducted much of their work behind closed doors, and interacted with citizens only at election time. Today, the expectation that citizens will have ongoing and immediate access to their elected officials and democratic institutions requires our institutions to keep pace with technology and to ensure increasing degrees of connectivity. And our House is no exception. We have made huge investments, and we have strived continuously to provide up-to-date IT solutions and services to our members and to the public. The striking fact is that, believe it or not, there was a time in parliamentary history when the reporting of the proceedings itself was illegal. It's hard to believe, but once the houses, in our case, the House and the Senate, gave themselves the ability to report and publish their own transcripts, this became the cornerstone for pretty much everything that followed. And you can follow that continuum through the development of published Hansard, through the adoption of electronic means to amplify and broadcast proceedings, right down to the current practices of many parliaments of webcasting and making available proceedings in the current formats. As Gerardo mentioned earlier, the last 20 years have really been the period of explosion. And that those innovations didn't happen in Canada, of course, as well. So if I can look back to the 1990s as a starting point, We started with a number of projects. We moved aggressively and created a high-speed communications infrastructure that led to the development of new and powerful tools and services to assist members and House officials in gaining access to and manipulating the ever-increasing amount of information. Our ultimate goal was to create an electronic, non-paper-based working environment. Now, before you start laughing, suffice it to say that we've gone some distance, but we're a far cry from being paperless. At the same time, the initial objective in making these investments was to allow members and the House administration to access, use, and repurpose information more easily through better networking, connectivity, and enhanced productivity tools. Increased public transparency was not necessarily the reason for doing this, but a positive byproduct of it. There are obvious benefits. The services result in a reduction of printing, postage, distribution, and storage costs, and so on. But really, the most dramatic change has been the way the user accesses and makes use of the information. The huge leap forward occurred for us in September 2001, when a new integrated technology system called PRISM was launched. This new environment created an indispensable archive of structured information that allows users across the organization to find and retrieve the details of debate and decision-making in the House and its committees. It's essentially a one-stop shop information database. Whereas in the past the House's record-keeping systems were designed primarily around the demands of publishing, PRISM generates the traditional documents as byproducts of a database that is focused on capturing information at a granular level so that it can be presented in many different ways and respond to the full range of needs of those who follow Parliament. From this XML-based platform, all kinds of information can be repurposed, and the data in PRISM can be converted into a variety of formats. It's precisely because of this built-in flexibility that the House administration, on short notice, was able to develop a new web-based application requested by the party caucuses that catalogs the voting records of members of Parliament and allows the information to be sorted and analyzed in different ways by the user. Users are able also to track bills and to find all events associated with a particular member of Parliament, creating a comprehensive index of all his or her interventions in the chamber and in committee. While the House of Commons as an institution has kept pace with public and private sector institutions in the manner it has integrated technologies, such as the Internet, it has taken a much more cautious approach to embracing the full potential of social media tools like Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. The use of social media poses challenges that go well beyond technological feasibility. Its potential to assemble and mobilize online communities and provide venues for segments of the population that have in recent years been estranged from the political arena holds the potential to revitalize participatory democracy. However, one incontrovertible challenge facing the House of Commons administration is that it is not mandated to actively promote activities falling squarely in the political arena. This sort of political participation is reserved for members of Parliament and must be led by them. The House administration, in our view, must remain strictly neutral, supporting members of all political parties and all parliamentarians in an impartial fashion. That said, the House has always enabled members to adopt and use social media since its early days by allowing social media applications to be deployed and used either via our internal networks or using mobile devices. At present, over 200 of our 308 members are on Twitter, for example. The House administration is presently developing social media strategies to further enable MPs in their various roles. For example, the Parliament of Canada internet site could accommodate social media capabilities and be used as a departure point from which the public could access individual MP portals. It would then be up to the individual member to determine just how he or she wanted to utilize these new ways of reaching the public by allowing them to a creative hand in designing and configuring their own portals. In addition, we're also working to see how Parliament can use internal social media to be more efficient and enhance services to MPs and to offer nonpartisan services such as outreach to students and virtual visitors. On the subject of open documents standards, the efforts made beginning in the 1990s to provide the House with advanced networking and connectivity capabilities made it possible to revolutionize the way that the members and the institution interact with the public. For some years now, the House has made its debates available in XML format, in addition to HTML and PDF formats. This allows external users of House products to tailor information for a variety of different purposes, according to their individual needs. External users are no longer bound by the lockdown content that the House chooses to post online in a one-size-fits-all standard. This is a significant departure from previous approaches. It's a truly transformative step in terms of increased public transparency, empowering the public to use our factual, objective information to conduct their own analyses and draw their own conclusions. This trend may increase the traditional tension that exists between producers and users of ideas and information. We're all familiar with the adage that information is power. As we move progressively and rapidly away from a construct where parliamentarians exert quasi-complete control over their information and the manner in which it is shared, they may begin to feel threatened. The deluge of information also poses other risks to parliamentary information, as official sources are drowned out by secondary producers. This phenomenon is already upon us. In a sense, we may come full circle. Citizens used to rely on others, their parliamentarians or the media, for information about Parliament. Now they can get that information unfiltered and play with it. Yet there's so much of it that they are again being drawn to secondary sources like tweets, blogs, YouTube, and so on. So this forces institutions to make choices about whether and how to restrict or encourage the flow of data. Of course, there's also the ever-present risk of sabotage and mischief to further imperil official parliamentary sources of information and the networks on which they are made available. So from establishing our own reporting capability in the 19th century at the House of Commons in Canada, to the technological advances of the 20th and 21st centuries, which permitted recording, television broadcasting, internet distribution, and audio and video captures of these proceedings, and now the provision of data in an open format, the House has aimed to use technology to improve the reporting of its proceedings. All of these advances have had the practical effect of increasing transparency by allowing ever greater numbers of Canadians to follow, monitor, and analyze what is going on in Parliament. While the House administration supports first and foremost its members, it's our obligation to maintain and establish and maintain high-quality tools to meet the modern-day demands of members and the public. It's become a given that the information provided must be objective, complete, accurate, up-to-date, well-maintained, and accessible. By creating an IT infrastructure that allows information to be made available for repurposing to meet the needs of any outside user, the platform has been built on which a more dynamic relationship between members and citizens is possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I already have questions, but we'll wait for the debate to open up the discussion. I understand that, yes, we'll have a PowerPoint presentation, and so let's wait for a second until it's up. Oh, perfect. I'm now giving the floor to Mr. Rogério Teixeira, who is the General Director of the Chamber of Deputies of Brazil, and a friend since a few years now. And so please, Rogério, you have the floor.
Mr. Casini, Mr. Bosc, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I want to say thank you for this opportunity. And I beg your pardon because I don't speak English very well, so please be patient to me. And I will try to talk about the experience of Brazil in transparency. As established by the 1988 Constitution, Brazilian Constitution, publicity is a principle that must be obeyed by all organs and agents of government, federal, state, or local. According to our constitutional doctrine, publicity should be widely conceived and applied to embrace the entire state activity. Official disclosure of the actions of state agents should include the provision of knowledge of the internal conduct of their agents. The Chamber of Deputies has been a pioneer among Brazilian public institutions in the disclosure of its actions. The Brazilian Constitution also determines that the publicity of acts, programs, public works, services, and campaigns of government agents shall be of educational, informative, or social orientation character, and shall not contain names, symbols, images that characterize personal propaganda of government authorities or employees. The Brazilian Constitution goes further and sets out publicity as an individual right. Like Brazilian Constitution, all persons have the right to receive from the public agents information of private interest to such persons, or of collective or general interest, which shall be provided within the period established by law, subject to liability, except for the information whose secrecy is essential to the security of society and of the state. The Chamber of Deputies understands the constitutional principle of publicity as the duty not only to inform the public, but also to enable citizens to interact with the institution and take part in the lawmaking process. Accordingly, the Chamber of Deputies offers several interaction channels to society. In addition to being public, information must be relevant, reliable, timely, and understandable. Publicity and information leading to participation, meeting the broader concept of transparency. More than an individual right, transparency should be considered as an instrument for social control over the state. Popular participation, the foundation of social control, strongly depends on the transparency of government actions and public accounts. As a principle of responsible public management, more than ensuring the fulfillment of legal rules, transparency in public administration is a public management policy that promotes responsible citizenship among the population. As a condition for interactivity, transparency promotes interactivity, especially when information provided by public entities is presented in open data format, allowing every citizen of organization to make their own treatment on the raw data. In 2023, the Chamber of Deputies will complete 200 years. In order to be prepared for this occasion, the advisory staff of Strategic Planning and Management of the House asked people what they expect from the institution by this date. Transparency, open access to information, and a better understanding of the legislatory functions were the most appraised items by different segments of respondents. In the strategic planning of the House, such indications are being translated into guidelines and action plans to meet the social demand. This video you are going to see now shows some of the tools and information and participation channels that already exist in the Brazilian Chamber of Deputies.
Intense debate.
Compromisso com a verdade.
Pela busca do acordo.
Decisive voting. From the floor and the committees come decisions which impact the life of every Brazilian citizen. It is he or she, the citizen, the focus of all initiatives that give publicity and transparency to the legislative process in the Chamber of Deputies. TV, radio, newspaper, internet. All media in the House bring timely and transparent information of what happens in every debate or vote. Everything is shown here. The discussion of bills, the development of the voting process, the presence of deputies on the floor and their votes, cost, bids, contracts, budget. More than 30,000 web pages available with information of public interest, acknowledged by the United Nations as one of the leading technological solutions for registry and publication of the legislative data. In 2011, there have been 55 million accesses to the Chamber of Deputies web pages. The House not only informs but listens to citizens as well by means of a 0800 phone line, the parliamentary ombudsman, polls and surveys on the internet. There are several ways to participate, protest, give an opinion, make suggestions. Citizens can also help make the laws. The Committee on Participative Legislation welcomes the suggestion of society. The virtual committees of e-democracy program promote discussions on key themes of the political agenda of the country. The program website attracts and draws together the diffuse participation of individual citizen and minority groups. All a citizen needs to do is to come in, register and participate. Strategic management is priority for the Chamber of Deputies. Everything done openly, listening to all stakeholders. In 2011, more than 1,000 users have been polled in our website surveys. They said what they expected from the institution for the next 10 years. The answer was clear-cut: modernization of the legislative process, interaction, accountability, transparent and accessible information. The Chamber website already displays in open data format legislative information on deputies, bills and votes, and administrative data on costs and contracts, all in raw, machine-readable format. Access www.camera.gov.br. Brazilian Chamber of Deputies, transparent and open to everybody.
Continuing, the Chamber of Deputies website is the main instrument of institutional transparency. It gives the public broad access to legislative and administrative data, almost in real time and increasingly in open data format. It had 15 million internet access in 2011. As far as legislative information is concerned, the website shows, in different formats, information on bills and laws, and speeches, presence of deputies in the floor and committees, sitting and voting results, Information is available in different formats: text, audio, video, and open data as XML. Regarding administrative information, the website shows federal budget and the Chamber of Deputies budget, contracts, biddings, public contests, deputies' expenses, and official missions. Launched in June 2009, e-democracy aims to engage citizens in the lawmaking process to achieve tangible legislative results. The program is a kind of crowdsourcing for legislative purposes. In particular, the e-democracy website attracts and gathers the diffuse participation of individual citizens and minority groups. Its main goal is to permit easier access to the decision-making process by citizens who are not engaged in strong interest groups or corporations that usually lobby to access the center of power in Brasilia, where the national government is located. In 2011, e-democracy had 55,000 access to web pages, 10,000 registered members, 4,500 visitors per month. E-democracy has innovative and accessible instruments for citizen participation. As you can see, this is an example of interactive public hearing. Citizens can watch video, chat with representatives, and debate on Twitter during a public hearing. We have realized that some representatives do not have time to post in virtual forums to discuss with citizens the main legislative issues. So, e-democracy developed a system that lets representatives express themselves the way they want, such as recording their opinions in videos. Brazil has been a leading party in the Open Government Partnership. Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff hosted with American President Barack Obama the official launch meeting in this global initiative on September 20, 2011 in New York. According to the commitments signed on this occasion, the participant countries are engaged to disclose public data in a complete, primary, timely, accessible, machine processable, non-proprietary license-free manner, and with non-discriminatory access. The recently approved New Access to Information Act includes important issues concerning transparency. Transparency is the rule, secrecy is the exception. The law requires that public sector organizations comply with requirements that will greatly enhance the transparency and interactivity with society, such as frequently asked questions, user-friendly search interfaces, supply of statistics and documents in open formats. Even before this team received international attention, the Seat Camera, a service of the House website, allowed dozens of organizations to obtain information in open data format directly from our database. Government agents, trade associations, non-governmental organizations, and other entities could daily follow the processing of bills and other proposals and update their systems by automatically tracking public information. Among the advantages of this service, we can mention the minimal risk of information loss and the possibility of independent processing. Once more, the House moves ahead of the legislation. The Access to Information Acts will enter in force in May 2012. The data in open format available nowadays are data on bills, abstract, author, date of presentation, processing course, last dispatch, assessment, status, link to full test, progress, indexing, integrity, the committee in which it's now located, rapporteurs and opinions, amendments, substitutes and final versions, votes on the bills. Agenda of the House committees, information on sessions, meetings of the organs of the House, date, time, location, type, object, bills when deliberative meetings, information on deputies, name, gender, part, state, cabinet address, phone number, email, committees to which he belongs, as a member or as a substitute, commissions in which they participate, leaders and vice leaders of caucus. In a second phase, scheduled for 2012, information relating to new areas and service will be provided. Further steps in the future will lead us to follow the development in this area, in the area of website semantics. In order to be understandable by humans and machines as well, our data must be enriched with metadata, allowing for more and better participation and social control. Although we recognize that there is much to be done, the Brazilian Chamber of Deputies is proud of its performance in this field and willing to keep up with the latest development in this area. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very interesting and different approaches, I would think, about the two legislatures. So this raises even more interest, I hope, among all of us. I said before that I already have questions, but I'll keep my own question for me for the moment, and I'll open the floor to any questions. I have one representative from the Chamber of Deputies of Italy.
Yes. The questions from to Mr. Ventura. What are the format of your open data?
That's it, Carlos Henrique? The XML format.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone wants to approach the notion of transparency, the evolution of transparency, please. Could you use the mic? Thank you.
There we go. Great. Okay, good. So standardized data, open data is one thing, but standardized data is another thing, which is the ability to search over common search terms across parliaments and across committees and whatnot. So I haven't heard much talk about standardized open data. I actually believe Brazil is using the UN standardized data format that's been widely deployed, I think, in Africa, if I understand correctly. This is where, in the United States, it seems we're way behind, where the legislatures are all developing their own individualized XML open data formats. They're not standardizing. So if you want to check for a certain type of bill over the 99 state legislatures, you can't do that, and that's a real problem. It's sort of remarkable because parliamentary procedure at a national level, Jefferson's manual started in Congress and then it moved to all the states, and even Robert's Rules of Order, which is standardized across tens of thousands of local parliamentary bodies, is actually derived from the standards that were originally in Jefferson's manual. So we have extraordinary homogeneity with parliamentary rules across literally tens of thousands of parliamentary bodies in the United States. But there seems to be no comparable effort when it comes to the next generation of standardized open data to have that type of standardization, which is a real problem if you want to search across the 15,000 school boards or 20,000 city councils or the 99 state legislatures or even within Congress across committees and whatnot. So I think Europe and the UN are actually doing a much better job than the United States in at least thinking about these issues. And maybe Brazil was also in the lead on this, if I understand correctly. So what about standardized open data as opposed to open data? Isn't that really the holy grail? Is standard, just mere open data is an intermediary step?
Thank you. Let's gather a few comments and information before we respond.
Roberto Busto with Chile. Excuse my English, I don't speak English very well. I think I am two ways for the transparency. One way is for open data format, I agree. But the other form is about the social network. Marc Bosc say about the social network, about the experience in the Senate in the last year, in the last budget, about Twitter. I put in a Twitter information about budget, and the next place in the night of the discussion or the debate of the budget. The citizens, the normal people, is not interested in data format. Is interested in information, in transparency. For this reason, I think the social network is a good way for this information. Other topic, other trend is, for example, in budget. The Congress needs to information of the executive power in metadata. It's necessary for cross the information. For this, I think it's two ways.
So if I understand correctly, there are two approaches to transparency. One, open data, particularly for budget issues, but also social networks to keep the citizens informed, those who may not be so inclined to use open data. In any case, they would like to be informed. Any other remarks? Mr. Schumann from Sunlight Foundation.
Thank you and good morning. The question that I have for both of you is, how have legislators responded to these changes in how information is being made available, and how has the public responded as well?
Any other comment, please?
Hi, I'm Sarah Schott from Knowledge is Power from the United States. Brazil has made tremendous progress in the last few years, and it's inspiring to see the range and quality of information that you're putting forward. And I see that the challenge often for parliaments and legislative bodies in terms of making their information open is really rooted in the technology that they're using in their drafting process. So I'd be curious to learn what internal modernizations you had to go through to be able to fuel the e-democracy system you currently have, and what formats you're using as well.
Thank you. Should we try to respond to some of these questions? Marc, please.
First of all, I think a majority of the questions were directed to my colleagues, so I'll just address those that I think I can comment on. On the standardization issue, I would defer to my colleague Soufiane, who might be able to comment. He's accompanying me from our house. And Soufiane, can you comment on that aspect?
I wasn't prepared to respond to any of the question. I said I would be a spectator this morning. I will be presenting some of the issue tomorrow around this, and certainly our adoption of open standard are mainly focused toward productivity, agility, and not open parliament at the time. Today we are adopting OData as a vehicle to make it more standard, but unfortunately this is one of the subjects I will be willing to discuss with some of you where is a standard for parliamentary Hansards, even though all the parliament, they produce practically the same content. Why there is no standard? Why we're not sharing about 15 years later? We work in Canada with the Department of Justice, and we collaborated in some instances with some U.S. Agencies, and unfortunately today we use our own standard and nobody is reusing our standard. Then there are a lot of standards.
Okay, so obviously there's more to say about that probably tomorrow. In terms of open data versus social networking, I would just say that I think the two go together because social networkers use the open data, those that are agile, they use that data and then they repurpose it. I'll have a story later on about a case that's happened in Canada in the last 2 weeks that has a, sort of a bit of a cautionary tale. In terms of how legislators have responded and citizens have responded, our parliamentarians, we have high turnover in our House of Commons. In the last election, we had over a third new members, many of them quite young. So we have a lot of early adopters, all the new bells and whistles they want. And so we strive to make that possible. So they've responded extremely well, and they're there, and in fact, some of them are ahead of us. So I think that's always a challenge for deliberative assemblies, is to keep up. In terms of the public, I think there's been a tremendous response, but the issue continues to be the same. Will the public find the official site? Will it know where to go for the official information, or will it just rely on secondary repurposed sites? It's hard to know without surveying, but our sites, our official sites, have heavy traffic. Our, believe it or not, television broadcasts and webcasts have significant traffic. So I like to think there's a good response from the public, but it's hard to know for sure. The last point I think I'll pass on. It's more technical. I'm not going to. Soufiane maybe I'll answer tomorrow. I don't know. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. Your turn.
I'm going to try to answer because I don't speak the English very well. But first of all, about the citizens and the parliamentarians' reaction, if I understand the questions. About citizens, I think they want so much more information about what parliamentarians do. There is a mistaken perception about the citizens of our work. But we have a lot of information that citizens don't know they can have this information. For example, about budget. All information about budget is accessible for citizens. And in many cases, they don't use. But the citizen is so quiet to simple. They want more and more information. About the parliamentarians' reaction, in the first time, they are against. They were against. But, for example, every cent the parliamentary expense are published in our website. At the first time, it was not so fine. Many expenses could be reserved, but now it's very good. So now it's very good for social control. And the parliamentarians wants to have their expenses published. So just at the first moment, they were against. Some of them were against. About the question of open data format or social publicity, participation, and other channels, the Chamber of Deputies has a lot of channels to inform the population, like a radio channel, like a TV channel, journal, websites. There's a lot of ways to make it more transparent. I think that the open format is the evolution of transparency. We have to develop from publicity to transparency to participation. I also believe that we have to go from information to education about the parliament. People sometimes don't know what to do with the information because they don't understand the process of lawmaking. It's important we give education to some people about the lawmaking process. And about e-democracy technology, somebody else. I'm not a technician, I don't know, I can't answer these questions, but my friend Carlos Henrique, that's here, he works for the Center of Information. He can give a better answer. I can also say that we have a little paper there in the table with the video we shown. If some of you want, please take there. I don't know if there's another question, Casini.
Yes, thank you so much. Now, I would like to spend another few minutes on possibly on well, and I'm sorry. I guess that standardization, as it was posed by the president of ISOLON, will be taken up probably tomorrow in the more technical sessions. But I guess you were referring to LexML Brazil and the issue of the adoption or the adaptation of Comantoso into the standards of XML Brazil. I'm sure that Mr. Carlos Araujo will be able to address these issues. Let's try to stay at the level of at the broad level of how technology is actually impacting on the notion of transparency. We heard in the presentation, in the opening speech actually on behalf of the IPU, that IPU defined the values of democracy as for parliaments as being representative, efficient, effective, accountable, transparent, among others. And I think more or less I have all of them. And I would say that that is the definition we have of transparency. There are many other pieces around of other bodies trying to define transparency in the past. But as we all know, it's such a difficult notion that I would. Many are saying, well, all of it is transparency. Now, my point is, can we come up with not a definition of transparency, but what is the contribution of ICT to transparency in general, not only on open document standards? Is there a contribution, a real contribution? We thought about social networks. But in the last, the open document standards, websites is probably one of the major tools the parliaments are using. And what has changed and what is going to be happening to parliaments also in the future? Because this is the evolution is actually happening now, not only in the last year. So that is one. So if we can discuss this issue. At the same time, I would like to take advantage of two senior managers, I would say, Deputy Clerk and Clerk of Parliament, to know as well what is the difficulties actually in being between the linkage between the technical and the administration, and I guess that you both have your IT staff and colleagues pushing for more and more, while you probably have, as you said, legislatures at the beginning, they were not really for placing the information about their salaries or their expenses on the web. So how difficult is to find a balance and dialogue with both sides of the house, the political and the more technical part. And third, we spoke about transparency, but in general, I would say, but you mentioned one thing that I liked, and it was that actually in the House of Commons of Canada, Open Document Standards started as an internal efficiency issue, which later helped transparency. So I think that's also something that we should keep in mind. What is the efficiency part of open data for an organization at the internal level, and not only to the external and to the public. So something about your difficulties or not difficulties to be the linkage between.
I think we have a very, very healthy and effective partnership with our ICT team. And more often than not, we are confronted with demands from parliamentarians that are a product of their own background or a product of their own experience outside of the House of Commons. Perhaps it's a small businessman who's been elected for the first time. Perhaps it's someone who has some experience in a high-tech area, or it's someone who, through just personally gained knowledge, has certain expectations on being elected. And our most frequent challenge, I would say, is in managing expectations of parliamentarians, trying to get them to understand that when they become a member of parliament, they are entering into a very large and vast network that has to have certain standards attached to it, and certain security protocols attached. And so that is often quite a significant amount of time spent by Soufiane and his colleagues and educating members on the limits of what they would otherwise like to do. At the same time, the whole issue of transparency from time to time really hits the members square in the face. I'll give you an example, a recent one. We have a Minister of Public Safety. His first name is Vic. And he, on behalf of the government, introduced 2 weeks ago a bill to aimed at giving police broader powers vis-a-vis the internet industry to allow police to get access to IP addresses and that kind of thing. The bill created a firestorm of public angst and protest. And Mr. the minister didn't help things when he got up in the House. And what the government has done is they've linked the objective of the legislation with a very visceral issue, child pornography. They've said the police need this legislation to achieve this end. The minister took it one step further by standing up in the House and saying, you're either with us or you're with the child pornographers. Needless to say, this has created just an incredible explosion. And because of technology available, someone took it upon him or herself. Two things happened. First, someone mischievously began posting on Twitter extracts from the minister's divorce proceedings. Very personal information, but public information, posting them 140 characters at a time over the course of several days. At the same time, someone else set up a website called Tell Vic Everything, in which people were invited to send the minister emails. All of this facilitated through House IT infrastructure. So people were sending Vic emails. I'll give you an example. Hey, Vic, I lost an important email, deleted it by mistake. Can I get your copy? Vic, I parked a little bit outside the lines in the parking lot. Is that okay? And on, tens of thousands of emails. Needless to say, our tech guys have managed to help him out so that, you know, the spam is kept away. But it's just an illustration of the power of these tools and the mischief they can be put to, as well as the benefits they're capable of creating for citizens who want to stay informed and know what's going on. So you're talking about balance. I think there's an infinity of potential misuses or abuses in our perspective of House resources for these kinds of things. At the same time, it may be the price to pay. So Soufiane may have some thoughts to add on that. I don't know from their perspective, but I would say we work very well together. We're aiming to common objectives, and in terms of the efficiency issues, that was really a no-brainer. When you have different parts of the organization re-inputting the same information over and over and over again for different purposes, it quickly becomes apparent that despite the cost of the investment you have to make to develop these tools, you're still ahead because you are opening up your horizon to a vast panoply of byproducts that you could never have imagined before. So yes, it's expensive. Do we spend less today than we used to? That's another question. Soufiane may have something to say. I see him.
I may add a couple of twists. First, the event is very, very revealing. Yeah, it's open. Yeah. Then the event was very revealing of what Marc haven't said also, that there is a huge movement called Anonymous. I don't know you know about it, but they helped also the case, and we have got about, in one weekend, about 20, 30 attacks to our network, trying to help the case. But I think we are speaking a lot about open data. Then the attacks of these hackers are trying to also, there's a risk around this, and when you open, it's more open processes than open data, and there's a disbalance right now between the desire of the technology ability to open the data and the processes and the capacity from the existing procedure and practices to respond. Again, give you another example that we are living right now, and chair of a committee decided to post all the briefs that we receive, and they traditionally we receive that in paper, and they read them and they put them somewhere, they translate them and they put them in the archive of the committee. But now they're asking us to publish them. Typically, in one question can generate about 500 of these briefs, 3 to 4 pages each. The problem today, we cannot impose a format, we cannot impose a process. All those briefs need to be translated in our case, and after that published. Then this will create huge pressure, not on the technology side, but on the business side of processing all these briefs. And after that creates a big question about what can be in these briefs, and if I publish it in my website, am I accountable of the content of these briefs? Which really creates a bigger debate. It's not a question of the data, it's more about the process itself, how open and how you're going to control the openness of this process. And that's really most probably the biggest challenge that we'll be facing is not technological but procedural, how we're going to deal with these cases. What is the parliamentary privilege? Somebody goes to a committee room, answer a question, and he's protected. Well, now he's answering the question through a Twitter feed. Is he protected? Answering a question by email. All those things will need to be really studied.
Thank you very much. I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Professor Tom Bruce before giving the floor to the Director General. Please.
I think it might be useful to distinguish at the outset between 4 different kinds of systems, at least, that we've encountered so far. Systems that are primarily for work and decision support, systems that are intended primarily for public information in a kind of broadcast or one-way sense, publishing, basically. Systems intended for citizen interaction, and systems intended for public accountability. There is, of course, a lot of overlap between those things, even at the conceptual level, and once you get into large data pools in overlapping implementations and architectures, it gets even worse. But I want to make the distinction primarily because I'm concerned, in a way for myself, I'm more or less in the publishing business, and I'm to some degree weary of being tarred with the public accountability brush, which presents a lot of sensitivities that more ordinary activities do not.
What I think I would like to have your views on your particular role in the Parliament as the linkage between the political sphere and the administration.
About my function in the chamber, about the link between the parliamentarians and the workers of the chamber. I have a thought that I think that's the most important for me. I used to say that we don't have to look at for the parliamentarians or for the workers themselves. We have to work for the institution. That's the most important thing for us, the institution. The workers go away, the parliamentarians go away, and the Chamber of Deputies keeps. That's what we think. Which the best? The question I make myself is it good for the institution? Is it good for the Chamber of Deputies? It's important in the long time term, or it's just for this moment? I think that's the best we can do. Look for the institution, always. When the workers act this way, and the parliamentarians also, when we all think about the institution, we don't have so many problems. I would like to talk about the ICT sector in Brazil, I want to say that all the sectors need to have strategic planning, but the ICT sector needs it more, because everybody, every sector needs a system, needs some tool to make this work in a better way. So we, in the last years, we gave special attention to ICT sector. I think we have 150 systems analysts in the Chamber of Deputies, and it's not enough. We have a lot of work to do. So what I want to say about this work of being the link between the parliamentarians and the work is to look at the institution. I think the most important to do.
Thank you very much. When you mentioned 150 system analysts, I saw some heads shaking, with despair by other heads of IT in Parliament. Anyone has additional comments on the broad range of issues that we... Yep. Well, South Africa, please.
Let me congratulate both the gentlemen on the progress that you've made in the use of ICT, particularly in the areas of public transparency. The biggest question is, all of this technology is great, and well, if you can get your members of parliament to use them. And I think the greatest difficulty that we as a parliament have had is to change the mindset of the members to use the modern technology and not to fall back to traditional means of communicating with their constituencies. How have you dealt with that particular problem, particularly around the area of political will? Is there political will to use these great technologies? And do the members want to participate, or do they have to be encouraged? And what programs do you have to encourage members to use the technology?
Well, I'm happy to comment. We have an ongoing innovation bent to our approach, and we have no difficulty at all in getting members to adopt new technologies. We typically will, when we want to deploy a new application or a new tool, we'll create a pilot, 20, 30 members. We approach those members through their party whip. We offer this opportunity. We have no difficulty finding volunteers willing to participate. And we've had good success with that approach. I mean, the new tools, the new technologies are tested by our own people in our own laboratories before we deploy it. We're confident that it's going to work and it's going to be appreciated. And so when it is in the pilot deployed, the members themselves quickly grow to like it, and they talk to their colleagues about it, and we then phase in a more general deployment. That's the approach we've followed for years, and it really has worked very well. As I said earlier, though, some members come in with expectations that we don't meet for very good reasons, security reasons. There can be a broad range. We had one member about 10 years ago who was keen on doing his own webcasting. He wanted, through his office budget, to purchase equipment that would allow him to have a roving camera, and he would do his own webcast. Well, again, there are policy issues that the House governance has to address as well. Is this a good idea? We have 308 members. What if 308 members wanted to do webcasts? And so on. There are other issues beyond the technology that need to be addressed. But on the whole, our members are are very early adopters of many, many of these technologies. And once they're onto it, and bear in mind, we focus on tools that will help them do their work. So we have extensive linkages to constituency offices to facilitate their work in the constituency through the network. All the tools we try to deploy are either in response to their own desires or things we ourselves have tested and discovered through our own research that we feel will be useful to them. So I don't know if that helps your question.
Brazil have this problem. Brazil have this problem. Brazil is a very large country. We have 513 deputies from different regions. And many times members don't know how to use the tools, the technology. But all of them want to use because people are using technology, so they have to do it. If they want, it's very important for us because we gave them special attention. So if a deputy, a parliamentarian needs to learn about using specific tools, we help them individually in his office, so he doesn't have to go to a class or something like that. ICT technician goes to his office and shows him everything about the tools. He can call any time, but that's the way. But some of them it's very hard to be familiar with this new technology.
Thank you. If there are no other two. First, Mr. Griffith.
I'd like to go back to question or points Mr. Bosc raised earlier on, and just ask the panelists if they could comment on whether what thought they've given to how we judge the success of efforts to be more transparent. What criteria do we use for this? Is it the type of documents that are available in open standard? Is it the number of accesses to our website? Is it a cost savings or some other criteria or multiple criteria that we use to judge the if you will, the return on investment of trying to be more transparent? And in a related case, in the growing use of social or participatory media, what thoughts or experiences have you had in coming up with criteria for judging how that is successful? Is it the number of participants? Is it the number of emails? This is a new territory for all of us, and I was just very interested in what thoughts you all have or what experiences you may have had in determining whether our efforts to engage citizens through technology, how we determine how successful that's being.
Let me take a second comment. Microphone, please.
Jim Snyder from MySol, and this relates to the two previous comments on political will and metrics. I did a study of 125 legislatures in the United States, the 99 states, Congress, and the 25 largest metro legislatures, the access to roll call votes by legislator. So what we have widely in the United States is we have chronological access to roll call votes. Many constitutions have journal clauses like the U.S. Constitution. And we have access to roll call votes by bills. What we do not have access to, except in some of the smallest states in the United States like Vermont and New Hampshire, is access to roll call votes by individual, which is the most sensitive politically access, because if you're an opposition candidate or the first thing you look at is your opponent's record. It's just not accessible. So in a representative democracy, you would think, oh, there's nothing more fundamental than access to the record of your representative. But that format, which is the most useful, is the least accessible. And we see this time and time again. Thomas doesn't have it. New York, the Senate just got huge amounts of publicity for a beautiful new website with all sorts of social media and whatnot, but it still doesn't allow you to access roll call votes by individual members. So this colors the question of political will. It isn't just unfamiliarity with the technology. A fundamental thing is, there's a little bit of a conflict of interest here. So this also relates to the issue of a metric. I think a metric should deal, starting with democratic theory, as to what are the key parameters of transparency. Clearly, an obvious and very, very simple one to measure is, do you have access to roll call votes by member as opposed to just chronologically or by bill? And there are many others similar to that. That's just a vivid one because it's so central to democratic theory and transparency. So that is, it's a question. In Brazil, you've got a wonderful system. Can a citizen access the roll call votes of an individual legislator by the legislator as opposed to in some other mechanism? That would be the question. Or in Canada, we can't really in the United States, except in some of these small legislatures.
Right. I'll start with the second comment first and say that in terms of access to votes, and Sufyan, I think, will be talking about this tomorrow, what we did with making the data accessible is that within a very, very short time, the parties themselves use the data to create this information. And it didn't take very long for outside groups to create the data you're talking about.
Yeah, we have that in the United States too.
Yeah, it's called How They Vote, and and that's publicly available. The approach we took was, it is not for us as an administration to put this information together. It's for us to make it possible to put it together. And that's a philosophical decision that was taken. That's the approach we took. We do not ourselves put on our own website that information. With regard to measuring success, that's a very difficult question. I guess it would apply to all technological investments, in a sense. In terms of making the legislature more accountable, I think there's an inherent value to giving citizens information. Is it a measurable benefit? Do people vote more? Do they, are they writing more letters or sending more emails? I'm not sure that's the case. I don't think we've seen an increase in our popular vote in Canada, for instance. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite. That's the trend. So it's hard to make a link between the advances in technology and what it's permitted and concrete results. That said, the fact that it's impossible now for assemblies to keep things confidential, right down to granular information like expenses, some legislatures have taken different approaches on that. I think in the UK, every receipt is published, something like that. Other countries, our own, we've taken a different approach with categories of expenses being published. These are decisions, but with the social media, information quickly spreads, and it has different results in different countries. We've seen what's happened in many, many countries in the world in the last year. There's no doubt that technology has an impact. Is it success? What is success? public participation. Certainly, students in Canada seem more engaged, but I can't say we've measured that. It's a hard one to grasp.
Thank you. Please, Rogério.
And trying to answer your question, sir. In Brazil, it's possible that the votes will be open during all the process, the lawmaking process. All the process can be accessed by people. Just from the beginning of the proposal, all the amendments, substitutes, and every vote of each deputy during all the process, not just the general results or the final vote, but the system e-democracy shows all the process for every citizen can watch, goes on with the evolution of the proposition till his end. And e-democracy also permits that the citizen offer an opinion to be included, an amendment or something like that to be included in the text of the law. So the parliamentarians will, of course, analyze this suggestion, but the citizen can now, with the e-democracy, offers an amendment for the text. I don't know if that's the question.
I think the question was a little bit different. If people can access votes, all the votes related to one member.
Yeah, in the course of a typical legislative season,
In
many
the
legislators,
whole-
1,000, 2,000 introduced bills, or there are roll call votes. It's very difficult to manually compile them if it's not presented that way. So it's one thing to have comprehensive information, but have it sorted chronologically or by bill. But the question is it readily available when you go to the website by the legislator? So you can track all of the floor votes, committee votes, motions by the individual legislator to see a pattern, and that is very difficult, typically takes literally days to compile for an individual if you have to do it manually and it's not available online. That there are other cases like that, but that one's just so vivid from a democratic theory standpoint that you want to be able to easily access information about your legislature by legislator, and that's the question. It's the format, not the availability of comprehensive data. It's data to make it easily available in a usable form for that purpose.
Carlos, everything's available, no?
By bill, okay. That's very common, yeah, okay.
Okay, information by bill then, for the moment. Well, let me, at this point, close the panel because it's time for a coffee break. And first of all, a round of applause for the two panelists. I would like really to thank them for their presentations and availability to respond. Let me give you just few information on the meeting. Of course, now the coffee breaks. We'll take coffee breaks going out from those doors because it's on the back. Half-hour coffee break, so please, enjoy it. When we come back, we're going to address again from the managerial point of view how to pursue a more open parliament. Lunch break is lunch break free, so there are options. There is cafeteria, exiting the doors within the CVC, the Congressional Visitor Center, or outside, of course, there are other options. But please do remember that at 6, from 6 to 8, we do have a welcoming reception, and the Honorable Speaker, John Boehner, will be addressing our group. For tomorrow, we'll break in 2 groups, and you will recognize yourself by the color of the badge. So I think if there are no other questions for issues related to logistics, we can go to coffee break. Thank you very much. Oh, there was a question, actually.
What means the colors?
Okay, right. Green, you follow me and you stay in this room. The blue will go to another room tomorrow morning. When you enter, you will be directed to the other room, which is nearby, but a little bit hidden. And then we will, of course, reconvene on the 3rd day. So green will stay here. Okay?
Can I take a picture of the 3 of you together? Sure. Right in this area where the flags are. Sure.
Oh.
Oh, you yes, sir. The whole train's